In the dim parlor of their family's weathered farmhouse on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Massachusetts, the Bramble twins huddled by the hearth, their identical faces aglow in the flicker of a single oil lamp. It was the fall of 1860, and the air carried the sharp tang of impending frost, slipping through the wall cracks like an uninvited guest. Eliza, the bolder of the two, traced patterns in the dust on the mantel with her finger, her dark curls escaping the ribbon that bound them. Beside her, Clara echoed the motion, though her touch was lighter, hesitant, as if the wood might snap back. At 13, they mirrored their mother in her youth, high cheekbones, eyes like polished chestnuts, but where Eliza charged into the world with a laugh, Clara favored quiet corners, sketching wildflowers in her notebook until the pages overflowed with secrets. Their father, Elias Bramble, a stern miller with hands calloused from years at the grindstone, paced the room that evening, his boots thudding against the uneven floorboards. "Storm's comin' early this year," he muttered, glancing out the window where maple trees clawed at the darkening sky. "We'll need to secure the barn before it hits." He didn't look at the girls directly, his worry fixed on the livestock, the sacks of flour waiting to be milled, anything that kept the family from the poorhouse. Their mother, gone these 3 years to the fever, had left a void that Elias filled with work, leaving the twins to their own devices more often than not. Eliza nudged Clara with her elbow. "Hear that? The wind singing again." She tilted her head, a mischievous glint in her eye, though her voice carried a thread of something deeper, curiosity laced with unease. It had started weeks ago, this peculiar melody drifting through the fields at dusk, faint as a whisper from the grave. No fiddle, no flute, no hymn from the church steeple could claim it. It wove through the rustle of leaves, tugging at the edges of their thoughts like a half-remembered dream. Clara froze, her pencil hovering over the page. She did hear it, always had, sharper than her sister, as if the notes burrowed into her ears alone. "It's not the wind," she said softly, her words barely rising above the crackle of the fire. "It's closer tonight." The sound was ethereal, a cascade of silvery tones that rose and fell without rhythm, evoking the patter of rain on a distant roof or the sigh of silk against skin. But there were no instruments in the hollows of Willow Creek, no traveling minstrel since the war rumors had thickened the roads with soldiers and refugees. Elias paused in his pacing, his brow furrowing. "What nonsense are you girls on about now? Music? It's the owls in the woods, or that old harmonica Josiah plays down by the creek." He waved a hand dismissively, but his eyes darted to the window, where shadows lengthened like fingers reaching for the glass. The twins exchanged a glance, they knew better than to press him. Father dismissed what he couldn't mend with his hands. As night deepened, the melody grew insistent, threading through the walls until it seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats. Eliza stood, drawn to the door despite the chill. "Let's see where it's coming from," she whispered, her bravery a shield against the prickling fear at her nape. Clara hesitated, clutching her notebook like a talisman, but followed, sisters bound by blood and this strange, unspoken pull. They slipped outside, the farmyard mud sucking at their boots, the music swelling as if welcoming them into its fold. The barn loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the moonless sky, and for a moment, the notes seemed to emanate from within, a lure wrapped in velvet darkness. Eliza pushed the door open a crack, the hinges groaning in protest, and they peered into the gloom where the cows lowed softly, unsettled. Nothing stirred but the hay, shifting in the draft. Yet the music played on, clearer now, wrapping around them like mist rising from the earth. Clara's hand found Eliza's, cold and trembling. "What if it's not music at all?" she murmured, the words tasting of ash. But Eliza squeezed back, resolute. "Then we'll make it stop." Little did they know, the first notes were only the beginning, a summons from the brambles that bordered their land, thorns that whispered secrets older than the hills, hungry for ears to hear them. Eleanor clutched the edge of the kitchen table, her knuckles whitening against the scarred oak. The melody lingered in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle, faint now but insistent, weaving through the cracks in the walls of their cottage. It wasn't the wind, nor the distant call of a nightjar, those sounds she knew from years of tending the brambles that choked the hills around Blackthorn Hollow. This was something else, a tune that pulled at her insides, harmonious yet hollow, as if played on strings stretched too thin. Beside her, Lydia mirrored the gesture, her twin's face pale in the flicker of the hearth fire. They were mirror images at 16, both with hair the color of wet chestnut and eyes sharp as thorns, but where Eleanor's gaze held a quiet resolve, Lydia's flickered with the wild spark of curiosity that had always gotten them into scrapes. "It's still there," Lydia whispered, her voice barely above the crackle of burning peat. "Listen, do you hear the trill, like a flute but, broken?" Eleanor nodded, though she wished she could deny it. The music had started at dusk, slipping under the door as they mended nets by the fire. At first, they'd laughed it off, perhaps old Mr. Harrow playing his fiddle from the village tavern, the notes carried on the autumn gusts. But it grew clearer, closer, until it seemed to emanate from the very floorboards beneath their feet. No instrument could make such a sound, ethereal, yes, but laced with a discord that set her teeth on edge, like the hum of bees trapped in a jar. Their father had been gone these 3 years, taken by the fever that swept the hollow, leaving the sisters to fend for themselves on the meager yield of wild berries and the occasional trap. Mother had followed him into the earth a year later, her lungs giving out from the damp. Now it was just them, the Bramble sisters, as the villagers called them, scraping by in this forsaken corner of Yorkshire. The isolation suited Eleanor, she preferred the rhythm of the seasons to the gossip of Blackthorn. But Lydia chafed at it, always dreaming of the lights in York or the ships in Hull. "We should ignore it," Eleanor said, forcing steadiness into her tone. She released the table and busied herself with the kettle, the iron handle cool against her palm. Water sloshed as she poured it over the dried chamomile, the steam rising like a veil. "It's just the house settling, or the river echoing off the stones. Come morning, it'll be gone." Lydia didn't move. Her eyes, fixed on the shadowed corner where the music seemed strongest, narrowed. "It's not the house. Feel it, it's calling." She stood then, her skirts whispering against the flagstones, and crossed to the door. The latch clicked open with a reluctance that made Eleanor's breath catch. Outside, the night pressed in, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The brambles that gave their family name loomed like skeletal guardians, their thorns glinting faintly under the sliver of moon. "Don't," Eleanor hissed, setting the kettle down with a clatter. But Lydia was already stepping onto the threshold, the melody swelling as if in welcome. It wrapped around them now, a siren's thread, pulling at memories Eleanor didn't know she had, visions of laughter in sun-dappled glades, faces half-remembered and kind. Yet beneath it lurked a chill, a wrongness that made her skin prickle. Lydia paused, hand on the doorframe, her breath visible in the cold air. "What if it's real? What if it's something come for us?" Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with that reckless hunger for the unknown. Eleanor joined her, the two of them framed in the doorway like a single shadow split in two. The music danced ahead, leading into the tangled woods that bordered their land, where no path dared venture after dark. In the distance, a branch snapped, sharp as a bone breaking. The tune faltered for a heartbeat, then resumed, sweeter, more urgent. Eleanor's heart pounded, a drum against the insidious harmony. She grabbed Lydia's arm, pulling her back inside, but the door swung wide on its hinges, refusing to close. The night air rushed in, carrying the whisper of leaves that sounded too much like voices. They barred the door at last, shoving a chair beneath the latch, but the music didn't fade. It seeped through the walls, a persistent guest, humming low as they huddled by the fire. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of endless corridors lined with brambles that sang in the dark. When dawn finally grayed the sky, the melody had quieted to a murmur, but Eleanor knew it waited, patient as the hollow itself. Lydia stirred first, rubbing her eyes. "We tell no one," she murmured, as if reading Eleanor's thoughts. But in her gaze burned a resolve that mirrored her twin's caution, twisted into something bolder. The village would call them mad, or worse, touched by the old ways that the church had long tried to bury. Yet ignoring it felt like tempting fate. As they stepped outside to tend the traps, the brambles seemed denser, their thorns curved like beckoning fingers, and the air hummed with the ghost of that unearthly song. The lantern's flame flickered low in the damp air of the Bramble cottage, casting shadows that danced like wary spirits across the rough-hewn walls. Eliza sat hunched over the scarred oak table, her fingers tracing the edges of an old family Bible, its pages yellowed and brittle from years of neglect. The music had come again last night, faint at first, like the sigh of wind through reeds, then swelling into a melody that twisted around her heart, pulling her toward the window. She hadn't slept since, and now, in the gray light of pre-dawn, her eyes burned with fatigue. Emma paced the narrow room, her bare feet scuffing against the packed earth floor. She was the bolder one, always had been, with her quick laugh and sharper tongue, but tonight her face was drawn, her dark curls unkempt. "We can't just sit here whispering about it like frightened children," she said, her voice low but edged with frustration. "Father's out mending the fence till noon. If we go now, slip into the woods before the village stirs, no." Eliza's response was immediate, her hand pressing flat against the Bible as if to anchor herself. She glanced toward the door, half expecting their father's heavy footsteps. He was a man of soil and silence, widower to their mother these 5 years, and he dismissed their fears as girlish fancies. But Eliza had seen the way the music lingered in Emma's eyes, turning her sister's gaze distant and hungry. "It's not safe. Remember what old Widow Hargrove said. The hollow where the music starts, folks who wander too deep don't come back whole." Emma stopped pacing, leaning against the cold stone of the hearth. Her fingers drummed an absent rhythm on her apron, mimicking the tune that haunted them both. Hargrove's half mad from her rheumatism. And what if it's not madness? What if it's real, something calling us? We've heard it every night for a week now, Eliza. Clearer each time, like it's learning our names. She crossed to the table, her shadow falling over her twin's hands. "We could take the lantern, the bread knife. Just to the edge of the brambles. See if it's a poacher's pipe or something else." Eliza met her sister's eyes, seeing the mirror of her own pallor, the shared freckles across their noses like faint constellations. They were identical in build, slender, with the bramble height that made them tower over the village girls, but Emma's spirit burned brighter, always urging forward while Eliza held back, weighing the risks. The music had started innocently enough, a lullaby weaving through their dreams after Mother's grave had been dug. But last night, it had pulled Eliza from her bed, her feet carrying her to the door before she woke fully, heart pounding. A knock rattled the door, sharp, insistent. Both girls froze. Eliza's breath caught as Emma snatched the lantern, dimming its wick with trembling fingers. "Who?" Emma whispered. The knock came again, softer this time. Eliza rose slowly, crossing the room with measured steps, her hand hovering near the latch. She cracked the door just enough to peer out into the mist-shrouded yard. There stood Thomas Reed, the miller's boy, no more than 17, his cap clutched in calloused hands. Rain from the night before clung to his woolen coat, dripping onto the stoop. His face was flushed, eyes wide with something between urgency and shame. "Miss Eliza," he said, voice hushed as if the woods themselves might overhear. I heard you and Miss Emma talking yesterday by the well. About the singing in the night." He shifted, glancing over his shoulder at the tree-line beyond the cottage, where the brambles twisted like black veins against the paling sky. "It's not just you. I heard it too, last full moon. Followed it a ways, thinking it was the traveling fiddler come early for the harvest fair. But there was no one. Just the tune, pulling like a current." Emma appeared behind Eliza, her presence a sudden warmth at her twin's back. "You?" she said, surprise sharpening her tone. "Why tell us now?" Thomas swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Because my little brother's been humming it all week. Won't stop, even in his sleep. And this morning, he woke up with scratches on his arms, deep ones, like thorns, but we ain't got brambles in the house." He leaned closer, voice dropping to a thread. If you're going to look, don't go alone. I'll come with you. After father leaves for the mill. Eliza's caution warred with the knot of fear in her chest. Thomas was steady, known for hauling sacks twice his weight without complaint, but his eyes held the same shadowed pull she felt in herself. We weren't, yes, Emma cut in, her hand gripping Eliza's shoulder. We are. Meet us at the old oak by the path, when the church bell tolls 8. Thomas nodded once, sharply, and backed away into the mist, vanishing like a ghost before Eliza could protest. She shut the door, turning to face her sister. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker with unspoken dread. This is folly, she murmured, but even as she said it, the faint echo of the melody stirred in her mind, a violin strain, perhaps, or the wail of some forgotten flute, urging her onward despite the chill that settled in her bones. By the time the bell tolled, the three of them were threading through the underbrush, the lantern swinging from Thomas's fist like a captured firefly. The woods smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves, the brambles snagging at their skirts and coats with insistent fingers. Emma led, her steps sure despite the uneven ground, while Eliza stayed close behind, scanning the gloom for signs of movement. Thomas brought up the rear, his breath steady but his free hand never far from the hatchet tucked in his belt. The music began as they crested the first rise, a whisper at the edge of hearing, harmonious yet off-key, as if played by fingers not. Alara pressed her ear against the frost-rimed window of the old manor, the glass cold enough to numb her fingertips. The music had returned that night, slithering through the cracks in the walls like smoke from a hidden fire. It wasn't the wind, nor the creak of settling timbers, no, this was a melody, faint and insistent, weaving notes that tugged at her insides. Beside her, Mira mirrored the pose, her breath fogging the pain in twin clouds. They were Bramble sisters, bound by more than blood, their shared silences spoke of secrets the village below the hill could never fathom. It's closer, Mira whispered, her voice a threadbare hush. Ilara nodded, not trusting words to capture the way the tune burrowed deeper, past skin and bone. The manor had been their inheritance from Aunt Lydia, a crumbling relic on the moor's edge, but since the autumn gales, it felt less like shelter and more like a snare. The twins had come here seeking quiet after their parents' fever took them, but quiet was a lie. The music started soft, like distant bells, then twisted into something alive, hungry. Downstairs, the fire in the grate sputtered, casting long shadows that danced like listeners to the unseen song. Elias, the groundskeeper they'd hired from the village, poked at the logs with an iron rod, his broad shoulders hunched against the chill. He was a man of few words, his face weathered like the stone walls, but his eyes held a wariness that matched their own. Storm's brewin', he grunted, not looking up. Best bar the shutters tight. Ilara descended the stairs first, her skirts whispering against the worn treads. Mira followed, clutching the locket that held a curl of their mother's hair, a talisman against whatever stalked their nights. The music swelled as they reached the hearth, a violin strain without bow, a piano cascade without keys. It pulled at Ilara's steps, making her sway as if caught in a current. We heard it again, Mira said to Elias, her cautious nature sharpening her words into questions. Upstairs. Do you, ever? Elias paused, the poker hovering. His gaze flicked to the window, where the moor's fog pressed like a living thing. Folk say the old well sings, miss. Buried things echo up. He didn't elaborate, but the tremor in his hand betrayed him. The twins exchanged a glance. They'd found the well that afternoon, half hidden by brambles behind the stables, its mouth sealed with mossy stones. The air around it hummed even then, a vibration they felt in their teeth. Ilara's bravery flared, hot and unyielding. We should go down there. See what calls. She grabbed a lantern from the mantel, its glass smeared with soot, and lit it with a match that flared bright against the gloom. Myra's hand shot out, gripping her sister's arm. At night? With the fog? It's madness. Her wit turned sharp, a shield. What if it's not a song, but a lure? Like the fishermen's tales of sirens in the mist. Elias straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Wells deep, and old. Aunt Lydia's time, or before. Best left." But his protest rang hollow, the music coiled around them now, insistent, drawing their feet toward the door. The wind howled as they stepped out, the lantern's beam cutting a frail path through the swirling gray. The manor loomed behind, its windows dark eyes watching. Brambles snagged at their hems, thorns drawing pinpricks of blood that the cold air turned to ice. The well waded 50 paces on, a black maw in the earth, its stones glistening wet. Ilara reached it first, kneeling to pry at the moss. The music thrummed loudest here, a chorus of whispers layered over strings that plucked at her heart. "Listen," she breathed, her voice lost in the fog. Mira crouched beside her, Elias a silent bulk at their backs. They worked in tandem, fingers raw, dislodging the seal until the opening gaped. A gust rushed up, carrying not just damp earth but a chill that seeped into their lungs. The melody sharpened, resolving into words, faint, archaic, pleading. "Sisters, come, hear the full song." Mira recoiled, her face paling. "Ilara, stop. It's pulling." But Ilara leaned closer, the lantern dipping perilously near the edge. The beam caught something below, a glint, like polished bone, half submerged in shadow. Her hand slipped on the slick stone, and the lantern tumbled free. It fell, spinning light into darkness, striking water with a distant splash. The music screamed then, a wail that clawed the air, before silence crashed down like a lid. Elias hauled Ilara back, his grip bruising. "Fool girl. Now it's dark, and we're blind." Myra's eyes darted to the well, where ripples echoed unseen. The fog thickened, swallowing the manor, and in the quiet, they heard footsteps, not theirs, circling just beyond the light. The song was gone, but its echo lingered in their veins, a promise of pursuit. They retreated, thorns tearing deeper, the cost of their curiosity now a weight that bound them tighter to the moor's grasp. Eleanor pressed her ear to the damp earth behind the old mill, the chill of the autumn ground seeping through her shawl. The music had led them here again, that whispering melody no fiddle or flute could mimic, threading through the brambles like a secret shared among the thorns. Beside her, Beatrice mirrored the pose, her twin's breath fogging the air in shallow bursts. At 14, they were mirror images, pale skin dusted with freckles, dark curls pinned back against the wind, but Eleanor's eyes held a sharper glint, the cautious one always scanning for the shift in the tune that might signal danger. The mill wheel creaked overhead, half submerged in the sluggish river, its stones moss-covered and silent save for the occasional groan. They'd snuck out after supper, defying Father's stern warnings about the fever that had taken Mother last spring. "The woods are no place for girls," he'd said, his voice rough as the saw he wielded at the lumber yard. But the music called, insistent as a heartbeat, and Beatrice, ever the bold one, had tugged Eleanor's hand with a grin. "It's just a game, Ellie. Like when we were little." Now, crouched in the shadows, the melody swelled from beneath the foundation, a low hum that vibrated in their bones. Eleanor glanced at her sister, whose face was alight with wonder, fingers tracing patterns in the dirt as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "Do you feel it?" Beatrice whispered, her voice barely cutting the dusk. "It's closer tonight. Like it's waiting for us." Eleanor nodded, though unease coiled in her gut. The first time they'd heard it, playing in the meadow behind the Bramble cottage, it had been a lilt, playful as birdsong. But each night since, it deepened, weaving in notes that tugged at memories. Mother's lullaby, hummed over the cradle, now twisted with something hollow, echoing. The town whispered of fairy rings and lost children, old tales from the 1860 settlers who'd cleared these Virginia hills. Father dismissed it as wine through the pines, but the twins knew better, the sound pulled them, night after night, further from the lantern-lit path. A twig snapped upstream, sharp as a whip. Eleanor froze, her hand clamping Beatrice's wrist. The music faltered for a breath, then resumed, but now it carried an undercurrent, a dissonance like strings fraying under strain. "Someone's coming," Eleanor hissed, peering through the brambles. Shadows lengthened along the riverbank, the sun dipping behind the ridge, painting the water in bruised purples. Beatrice pulled away, eyes wide but unafraid. Maybe it's part of it. The music wants us to follow. She stood, brushing soil from her skirts, and took a step toward the mill's crumbling wall. Eleanor hesitated, heart pounding against her ribs. Last week, their plan to trace the sound to the old chapel had backfired. The melody had shifted, leading them in circles until dawn, leaving Beatrice with a fever chill that lingered for days. Father had noticed the dirt under their nails, the exhaustion in their steps, but they'd spun a tale of chasing fireflies. Now, as Beatrice reached the wall, her fingers grazing the weathered stone, the hum intensified, vibrating up through the soles of their boots. A faint glow seeped from a crack at the base, not firelight but something softer, like moonlight trapped in milkweed silk. Eleanor's caution warred with the pull. She rose, joining her sister, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and decaying leaves. "We can't go in," she murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. The music swelled, wrapping around them, and for a moment, it sang of warmth, of secrets unveiled. Footsteps crunched closer, deliberate, not the careless tread of a wanderer. Beatrice whipped around, but Eleanor grabbed her arm, yanking her into the thicker brambles. They huddled, thorns snagging their hems, as a figure emerged from the tree-lean, Mr. Harrow, the miller, lantern swinging in his gnarled hand. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken like pits in the flickering light. He'd lost his own daughters to the river 2 summers past, or so the town said, drowned while picking berries, though some whispered of music luring them under. He paused at the water's edge, head tilting as if listening. The melody dipped, almost mocking, then rose again, faint to Eleanor's ears but drawing a shudder from the man. "Girls," he called, voice cracking like dry timber. "That you, Bramble sisters? Come out now. Ain't safe after dark." Beatrice stifled a gasp, her hand trembling in Eleanor's. They held still, breath sync to the rhythm of the hidden tune. Harrow lingered, sweeping the lantern in arcs that clawed at the shadows, but the brambles shielded them. Finally, he muttered something low, a curse or a prayer, and trudged back toward the path, his silhouette merging with the gloom. The music softened, retreating into the earth like a sigh. Beatrice exhaled, slumping against Eleanor. "He heard it too," she said, wonder edging her fear. "It's not just us." Eleanor didn't reply, staring at the crack in the wall where the glow had faded. The pull lingered, a thread tugged taut, but now it carried weight, the risk of being caught, of Father's wrath, of whatever haunted Harrow's steps. As they slipped away through the underbrush, the first stars pricking the sky, Eleanor wondered if the music was calling them to join the lost, or warning them to flee. The night air tasted of frost, and the melody followed, fainter but unrelenting, into their dreams. Eleanor clutched the lantern's handle, its weak flame flickering against the damp stone walls of the old mill. The air hung thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten grain, but it was the music that clawed at her thoughts, a faint, silvery melody that seemed to weave through the cracks in the floorboards, unbidden and sourceless. She glanced at Lydia, her twin, who stood frozen by the rusted machinery, eyes wide as if the notes were pulling strings attached to her very bones. "It's louder here," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely cutting the hush. Lydia nodded, her fingers twisting the hem of her woolen shawl, the one Mother had knitted before the fever took her last winter. They had followed the sound from the village edge, past the whispering willows that bordered Bramble Hollow, drawn like moths despite the warnings from old Mr. Harrow at the tavern. That mill's cursed, he'd slurred over his ale, music from the devil's fiddle, luring folk to their doom. But the twins couldn't ignore it, the melody had started weeks ago, faint as a lullaby in their shared dreams, growing insistent until it echoed in the daylight hours, haunting their chores at the family's modest farm. Now, in the mill's shadowed heart, it swelled, a violin strain without bow, a harp's pluck without hands, impossible, yet piercing. Lydia took a step forward, her boot scuffing against a loose plank that groaned under the weight. "Ellie, look." She pointed to the far wall, where faint scratches marred the stone, not random but deliberate, like notations on a sheet of music. Eleanor raised the lantern higher, the light dancing over symbols that twisted like vines, notes, perhaps, or runes from some forgotten hymnal. Her heart quickened, the music shifted then, dipping into a minor key that tugged at her chest, evoking the ache of loss, of mother's final rattle in the night. "We should go back," she said, but her feet betrayed her, inching closer. The challenge wasn't just the sound, it was the pull, the way it mirrored their grief, making the air feel heavier, as if the mill itself breathed their sorrow back at them. A sudden creak echoed from above, the rafters sighing like an old man's lament. Dust sifted down in lazy spirals, and the music paused, abrupt, like a breath held. Lydia grabbed Eleanor's arm, her nails digging in. "Did you hear that?" "Not the music, the wood." They both tilted their heads, listening to the silence that followed, broken only by the distant drip of water somewhere in the foundations. Eleanor's mind raced. They'd come prepared with the iron key from Father's tool shed, thinking it might unlock some hidden mechanism to silence the tune. But now, as shadows lengthened in the lantern's glow, doubt crept in. What if the music wasn't something to stop, but something that had chosen them? They pressed on, weaving through the skeletal remains of the grinding wheels, their skirts brushing against cobwebs that clung like spectral fingers. The melody resumed, softer now, almost inviting, leading them toward a narrow staircase spiraling up to the loft. Eleanor's caution warred with curiosity. Lydia, ever the bolder, ascended first, her footsteps muffled by layers of decayed straw. At the top, the space opened into a chamber cluttered with abandoned crates, and there, in the corner, sat an object that stole their breath, a violin case, leather cracked and dusted with age, unopened yet humming faintly with the tune's vibration. Lydia knelt before it, her hand hovering. "This can't be real." The case bore no lock, but when she touched the clasp, a chill radiated through her palm, sharp as frostbite. Eleanor knelt beside her, the lantern casting their twins' faces in twin pools of light, pale, determined, mirrors of each other in resolve and fear. The music swelled again, urgent, as if urging them onward. With a shared glance, they flipped the latch. Inside lay not a violin, but a bundle of yellowed papers, scores, handwritten in spidery ink, dated 1842. The top sheet bore a dedication, "To the sisters who listen." As they unfolded the pages, the mill seemed to hold its breath. The notes on the paper matched the melody exactly, but woven among them were words, fragmented: "The sound binds the lost, follow to the hollow's heart, or it claims what echoes." Eleanor's throat tightened, the hollow, the very woods they'd skirted to reach here. The music, no longer distant, thrummed in their ears, a warning or a call. Lydia's eyes met hers, fierce. "We can't leave it now. It's about us, about Mother." But Eleanor's caution flared. The cost was clear in the chill seeping into their bones, the way the shadows in the loft seemed to deepen, reaching like fingers toward the papers. They gathered the sheets, stuffing them into Lydia's satchel, the music protesting with a dissonant wail that rattled the crates. As they descended, the staircase felt narrower, the air thicker, and Eleanor swore she heard footsteps, not theirs, trailing just behind. Outside, the night had fallen fully, the willows rustling as if applauding their theft. The melody lingered in their wake, fainter but unrelenting, pulling them deeper into the hollow's embrace. Whatever truth the papers held, it came with a price. The music now lived in them, a secret rhythm that promised revelations, and ruin. The fog clung to the marshes like a living shroud, muting the distant cry of a heron into something almost human. Eliza gripped the lantern's handle tighter, its weak flame flickering against the damp chill that seeped through her woolen shawl. Beside her, Lydia walked with that unnatural grace, her head tilted as if listening to a whisper only she could catch. But Eliza knew better. They both heard it now, the melody threading through the reeds, a violin's mournful wail, sharp and insistent, rising from the bog's heart where no musician could stand. They had come too far to turn back. The sisters' plan from the inn had unraveled hours ago, when the ferryman refused them passage across the wider inlet, muttering about lights in the water that danced without source. So they struck out on foot along the hidden paths their father once mapped for duck hunts, paths now half swallowed by the tide's greedy advance. Eliza's boots sank into the mud with each step, pulling at her ankles like insistent hands. "It's closer," Lydia said, her voice barely above the slosh of water. Not a question, just fact, delivered with the calm of someone reciting a prayer. Eliza nodded, though doubt gnawed at her resolve. The music had started as a faint hum 2 nights prior, in their cramped attic room above the seamstress shop in York. At first, Lydia dismissed it as the wind through the eaves, but by dawn, Eliza heard it too, notes that curled like smoke, harmonious yet laced with a discord that set her teeth on edge. No fiddle or flute could produce such tones, too pure, too piercing, as if the strings were spun from starlight or sorrow. Whispers in the village spoke of the Bramble Marsh's curse, an old tale of drowned fiddlers whose tunes lured the unwary to watery graves. Eliza had laughed it off as superstition, but Lydia's eyes had darkened, her sketches filling with swirling patterns that mimicked the melody's rhythm. Now, knee-deep in the mire, the lantern's glow caught something unnatural, a ripple in the stagnant pool ahead, not from wind or fish, but a deliberate undulation, sinking with the music's swell. Eliza's heart stuttered. "We should circle wider. The path to Aunt Myra's cottage is that way." She pointed east, where the fog thinned just enough to reveal twisted willows like skeletal sentinels. Lydia paused, her pale cheeks flushed from the cold. "It's calling us forward, Eliza. Don't you feel it? Like Father's voice in the hymns, but hungrier." She stepped closer to the pool, heedless of the mud sucking at her hem. Eliza lunged, grabbing her sister's arm. The contact sent a shiver up her spine, not just chill, but a vibration, as if the melody pulsed through Lydia's veins. A low chuckle echoed from the mist, not from the music, but layered beneath it. Eliza froze. The sisters weren't alone. From the reeds emerged a figure, hunched and cloaked in oilskin, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat dripping with moisture. Mr. Harrow, the trapper from the village edge, who sold pelts at the market and eyed them oddly whenever they passed. His eyes gleamed yellow in the lantern light, like a fox's. "Bramble girls," he rasped, voice thick as the bog. "Chasing ghosts again? That tune's no song for the living." Lydia straightened, unafraid. "You hear it too, then? Why follow us?" Harrow's laugh bubbled wetly. "Follow? Been waitin', fair fools like you. Marshes take what they want, but sometimes they need a nudge." He shifted, revealing a glint of metal, a small, curved blade at his belt, etched with runes that twisted like the music's notes. Eliza's caution flared into action. She swung the lantern in a wide arc, its light slashing the fog, forcing Harrow to recoil. "Run, Lydia!" They bolted, skirts tangling in the undergrowth, the music surging louder, a crescendo that drowned their gasps. Behind them, Harrow's footsteps splashed, deliberate and unhurried, as if he knew the bog's paths better than blood. They stumbled into a clearing ringed by ancient oaks, their roots clawing the earth like desperate fingers. The music peaked here, emanating from a cluster of moss-covered stones half sunk in the ground, ruins, perhaps from some forgotten chapel. Lydia collapsed against a trunk, clutching her ears. "It's inside now. Singing our names." Eliza scanned the shadows, breath ragged. Harrow was closing in, his silhouette merging with the fog. But then, a new note intruded, a faint, discordant hum from the stones themselves, vibrating the air. The trapper halted at the clearing's edge, his bravado cracking. "No, not yet," he muttered, backing away as the music twisted, turning voracious, pulling at them all. In that moment, Eliza saw it, a faint glow beneath the stones, pulsing in time with the melody. Not invitation, but trap. She yanked Lydia to her feet. "We break it. Together." Grabbing a loose root, thick as her arm, Eliza pried at the nearest stone, muscles burning. Lydia joined, her hands steady despite the fear etching her face. The music wailed in protest, the fog thickening to choke them. Harrow lunged from the mist, blade raised, but the ground trembled. The stone shifted, releasing a plume of spectral light that lashed out, coiling around the trapper like vines. He screamed, a sound swallowed by the marsh's gurgle, vanishing into the depths with a final, wet thud. The sisters froze, the music fading to a whisper. But as they fled toward the cottage lights in the distance, Eliza felt it linger, an echo in her bones, promising return. Aunt Myra's door would offer shelter, but the melody had marked them, and the marshes never forgot a debt. The fog clung to the hollows of Blackthornwood like a living shroud, muting the distant call of a nightjar into something mournful and wrong. Eliza pressed her palm against the rough bark of an ancient oak, feeling the pulse of the music thrumming through it, faint now, but insistent, like fingers tapping on the inside of her skull. Beside her, Emma knelt in the damp earth, her skirts muddied to the knees, tracing the faint carvings that ringed the base of the tree. They weren't runes, not exactly, more like the scratches of a child trying to capture a melody in wood, erratic loops that seemed to writhe when stared at too long. "It's closer," Emma whispered, her voice barely cutting the mist. Her eyes, wide and shadowed under the brim of her bonnet, flicked upward. The branches overhead twisted into impossible shapes, as if the tree itself were listening. Eliza nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. They'd followed the sound for days now, ever since it had slithered into their dreams back at the cottage, pulling them from the safety of hearth and harvest. Father had called it fancy, a product of their twin-born whimsy, but the music didn't lie. It promised secrets, and secrets had teeth. A twig snapped somewhere to their left, sharp as a bone breaking. Eliza froze, her hand dropping to the pocket where she kept the small silver locket, their mother's, etched with the same looping patterns. Emma rose slowly, brushing soil from her hands, her cautious nature warring with the pull in her chest. "Not an animal," she said, more to herself than her sister. Brave Eliza would charge ahead, always had, but Emma saw the traps in haste, the way the fog swallowed sounds, the unnatural chill that seeped into bones despite the summer warmth. They moved together, skirts whispering against bracken, toward the sound. The music swelled again, not from the tree this time, but from the ground, a low hum rising through the soles of their boots, vibrating up their spines. It was no fiddle or flute, it mimicked the wind through reeds, yet carried voices, layered and discordant, as if a choir had drowned in a well and learned to sing from the depths. Eliza's breath quickened. "There," she pointed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. Through a veil of mist, a shape emerged, not the expected deer or fox, but a figure, hunched and cloaked, kneeling at what looked like a shallow pit. Emma gripped Eliza's arm, nails digging in. The figure didn't turn, but the music peaked, a crescendo that made the air shimmer. They crept closer, hearts pounding in unison, the twin bond a fragile tether against the encroaching dread. The pit was no natural hollow, its edges were lined with stones, each inscribed with those same scratches, and at its center lay a cluster of bones, small, fragile, like a bird's, arranged in a spiral that echoed the melody's rhythm. The cloaked one reached out, fingers gnarled as roots, and plucked a string that wasn't there. The hum twisted into a wail, and Eliza clapped her hands over her ears, but it burrowed deeper, into the marrow. "Who are you?" Eliza called, her bravery surging like bile. The figure paused, then rose with a creak of joints, turning slowly. Beneath the hood, no face gleamed, only shadow, endless and hungry, with 2 pinpricks of light where eyes should be. Emma pulled back, whispering urgently, "We should go." "This isn't," but the shadow thing tilted its head, and the music poured from it, wrapping around the twins like smoke. It wasn't inviting now, it demanded, pulling at memories Eliza didn't know she had, their mother's lullabies, twisted into something feral, and a forgotten night when the cottage windows had rattled with unseen winds. The locket grew warm against Eliza's thigh, burning through fabric. She yanked it free, holding it aloft like a talisman. The pinpricks flared, and the figure lunged, not with speed, but with inexorable slowness, as if time bent to its will. Emma shoved Eliza aside, the two tumbling into the bracken as the shadow's hand brushed the air where her sister had stood. They scrambled up, breathless, the pit yawning between them and the thing. "Run!" Emma gasped, but Eliza hesitated, staring at the bones. One was out of place, a human finger bone, yellowed and cracked, bearing a ring that glinted faintly. Their father's signet, lost years ago in these very woods. The music fractured into laughter, cold and echoing, as the shadow advanced. Eliza snatched the bone, tucking it into her bodice, and they fled, the fog closing ranks behind them. But the hum followed, burrowing deeper, promising revelations that tasted of rot. In the distance, the cottage lights flickered like dying stars, and for the first time, Eliza wondered if the music had ever been theirs to hear, or if it had chosen them to silence. The fog clung to the riverbanks like a shroud, muting the lap of water against the skiff's hull. Eliza gripped the oars, her knuckles white, while Clara sat at the bow, her sketchbook abandoned on the damp wood. The melody had returned at dawn, faint as a whisper through the reeds, pulling them from the crumbling mill where they'd hidden the night before. It wasn't the frantic piping of yesterday, this was slower, a dirge that wound through the mist, promising secrets if they followed. "We should turn back," Eliza murmured, her voice barely cutting the haze. She was the cautious one, always had been, her dark curls plastered to her forehead from the chill. But Clara shook her head, eyes fixed on the bend ahead where the river widened into the old quarry lands. The music swelled there, or so it seemed, tugging at something deep in her chest. The skiff scraped against a submerged log, jolting them. Eliza cursed under her breath, shipping the oars to steady the boat. In the silence that followed, the notes sharpened, a violin string plucked in the ether, joined by the hollow thump of a drum no hand could strike. Clara leaned forward, tracing the air with her fingers as if she could capture it on paper. "It's closer now. Listen, it's calling us home. Home." The word hung between them like the fog. Their family's estate lay miles upstream, shuttered since father's death 2 winters past, the servants scattered like leaves in autumn. But the music had started then, in the empty halls, and it had followed them into the wilds, through the bramble thickets and forgotten paths. Eliza rode on, jaw set, though doubt gnawed at her. They'd lost the compass in the mill's collapse, and the sun was a pale smear overhead. One wrong turn, and the river could swallow them whole. As they rounded the bend, the quarry emerged from the mist, a yawning scar in the earth, its sheer walls veined with moss and shadow. The water lapped at its edges, black and still, save for ripples that spread without cause. The music poured from there, rich and layered, as if an orchestra hid in the depths. Clara stood, unsteady, her skirts sodden. "There," she breathed, pointing to a ledge halfway up the cliff, where something glinted like polished bone. Eliza hauled on the oars, veering toward the shore. The skiff grounded on gravel with a grind that set her teeth on edge. They scrambled out, boots sinking into the mud, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and decay. Clara moved first, scaling the slippery path with the grace of someone entranced, her laughter light despite the peril. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Like the concerts in the city, but purer." Eliza followed, heart pounding, her hands slipping on lichen-slick rocks. She glanced back at the river, now a gray ribbon vanishing into the fog. No turning back now. The ledge was narrow, barely a shelf, and the glint resolved into a shard of ivory, part of a flute, perhaps, wedged into a crevice. Clara knelt, reaching for it, her face alight. But as her fingers brushed the fragment, the music twisted. The dirge fractured into dissonance, a screech like metal on glass echoing off the walls. The ground trembled, pebbles skittering into the abyss below. Eliza lunged, grabbing Clara's arm. "Don't," too late. The shard crumbled to dust in Clara's palm, and from the crevice poured a shadow, coiling like smoke. It wasn't sound alone, it had form now, tendrils questing toward them, cold as the grave. Clara recoiled, eyes wide, the dust sifting through her fingers like forgotten notes. The shadow whispered, names, their names, twinned in the dark. Eliza pulled her sister back, the pair sliding down the path in a tangle of limbs and skirts. They hit the gravel hard, the skiff bobbing just out of reach. The shadow lingered on the ledge, pulsing with the remnants of the melody, then withdrew, leaving only silence and the echo of their gasps. They pushed off from shore, the oars biting deep into the water. Clara wiped her hands on her dress, staring at the empty palm. "It knew us," she said, voice small. Eliza rowed harder, the quarry fading behind, but the fog seemed thicker, the river reluctant to release them. The music had changed. It hummed now in their blood, a promise or a curse, drawing them onward toward whatever waited at the estate's shadowed gates. By midday, the current quickened, carrying them past familiar willows that bent like mourners. Eliza's arms burned, but she didn't stop. Clara hummed softly, unbidden, the tune twisting into something new, haunting, yet laced with defiance. They were the Bramble sisters, bound by more than blood, and whatever played that unearthly psalm would learn their resolve. The estate loomed as dusk fell, its spires piercing the mist like accusing fingers. Windows gaped black, but a light flickered in the attic, their old room. The skiff beached on the overgrown dock, and they climbed the steps, hand in hand, the melody swelling to greet them. Inside, the air was stale, dust motes dancing in the faint glow. Footsteps echoed from above, not theirs. Eliza barred the door with a chair, her breath ragged. "We end this tonight." Clara nodded, slipping a candle from her pocket, its flame steady against the encroaching dark. The music rose, inviting, insidious, and the twins ascended the stairs, the house creaking in harmony. The fog clung to the marsh like a shroud, muting the distant calls of night birds into hollow echoes. Eliza gripped the lantern's handle tighter, its weak flame flickering against the damp chill that seeped through her woolen shawl. Beside her, Lydia walked with that unnatural poise, her steps silent on the spongy ground, as if the earth itself yielded to her. The melody hummed in their shared blood again, faint but insistent, pulling them deeper into the reeds where no path should have led. They had come this way after the vicar's warning failed to deter them, his tales of the old fen spirits dismissed as superstition born of too many solitary evenings. But now, with the moon veiled and the air thick with the scent of decay, Eliza felt the first true stir of doubt. "Lyd," she whispered, her voice barely cutting the mist. "This isn't right. The music, it's changed. It's not calling us home anymore." Lydia turned, her twin's face pale and sharp in the lantern's glow, eyes wide with that feverish gleam Eliza had come to dread. "It's leading us to the source, Eliza. Don't you hear it? The strings, the breath, it's waiting for us." She reached out, fingers brushing Eliza's arm, and in that touch, the tune swelled, wrapping around Eliza's thoughts like vines. She shook it off, stepping back, the mud sucking at her boots. Ahead, the reeds parted unnaturally, revealing a circle of willows bent inward, their branches woven into a crude arch. No wind stirred them, yet the leaves rustled with a sound like distant applause. Eliza's heart pounded, each beat sinking to the rhythm that pulsed from the ground. She remembered the nights in their cramped attic room, the music first arriving as a lullaby, drawing them from sleep to stare at the rafters. It had promised secrets, kinship beyond their isolated life in the Bramble cottage. But secrets came with teeth. Lydia moved forward without hesitation, slipping through the arch. Eliza followed, cursing under her breath, the lantern casting long shadows that twisted like grasping hands. Inside the circle, the ground was dry, impossibly so, carpeted in moss that glowed faintly, as if lit from below. In the center stood a stone, weathered and low, etched with spirals that seemed to writhe when Eliza blinked. The music emanated from it, not played but born, a harmony of whispers and sighs that made her skin prickle. Kneeling, Lydia traced the carvings with reverent fingers. "Here," she murmured. "This is where it began. The old ones left it for us." Eliza knelt beside her, the stone cool under her palms, but as she touched it, a vision flashed, two girls, not unlike them, dancing in this very spot under a blood moon, their laughter turning to screams as shadows rose from the earth. She jerked away, breath catching. "Lyd, we have to leave. This isn't ours, it's a trap." But Lydia's eyes were distant, her hand pressing harder against the stone. The music surged, and from the spirals, thin tendrils of mist uncoiled, coiling around her wrist like bracelets. She didn't flinch, instead, she smiled, a serene curve of lips that chilled Eliza more than the fog. "Feel it, Eliza. It's family. We've been alone too long." Eliza lunged, grabbing her sister's arm, pulling with all her strength. The mist resisted, tendrils snapping like brittle bones, and Lydia cried out, not in pain, but ecstasy. They tumbled back, the lantern shattering against the stone, plunging them into near darkness. Only the moss's eerie light remained, illuminating Lydia's face as she rose, unharmed, the mist now trailing from her like a veil. Outside the circle, the reeds closed in, the path vanishing behind a wall of whispering leaves. Eliza scrambled to her feet, heart racing. The music laughed now, a low, mocking trill. Lydia extended a hand, her voice soft and pleading. "Join me, sister. It's beautiful." Eliza backed away, thorns from the willows snagging her skirt, drawing blood in fine lines. The dread coiled in her gut, not sudden terror, but a slow unraveling, the realization that the music had always been a thief, stealing pieces of them night by night. She wouldn't let it take them whole. "No," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. "We're going home. Together, or not at all." Lydia hesitated, the mist flickering, and for a moment, the twin bond flared bright, memories of shared secrets, stolen apples from the orchard, whispers in the dark. Then the music pulled, and Lydia stepped closer to the stone. Eliza turned, plunging into the fog, the reeds parting just enough to let her through, as if the fun itself wavered. Behind her, the melody twisted into a wail, but she didn't look back. The cost was already etched in her skin, one sister saved, perhaps, but the other forever changed. The fog clung to the hollow like a shroud, muting the world beyond the bramble thicket where Eliza and Emma had first heard the melody. It had been weeks since that night, but the music never truly stopped, not in their ears, not in their bones. Now, deep in the heart of Eldridge Hollow, the twins pressed on, their lantern's flame flickering against the damp stone walls of the old mill. The structure loomed, half swallowed by ivy and rot, its will long silent against the sluggish river. Eliza led, her hand steady on the rusted door, though her pulse thrummed with the rhythm that wasn't there. Brave as ever, she wouldn't let Emma see the fear-etching lines around her eyes. Emma trailed close, clutching the worn journal their mother had left behind, the one with sketches of notes that twisted like thorns. "It's louder here," she whispered, her voice cautious, barely cutting through the drip of water from the rafters. The music swelled in their minds, a violin strain that curled without bow, a piano cascade without keys. It pulled at them, insistent, promising secrets if they just followed deeper. But Emma remembered the cost, father's disappearance last harvest, lured into the hollow by the same song, mother's descent into silence, humming until she wandered off one dawn. The twins had vowed to end it, to silence the source before it claimed them too. They'd come prepared this time, or so they thought. The plan had been simple: trace the echoes to the mill, the oldest ruin in the hollow, where locals whispered of indentured souls bound by forgotten pacts. Eliza carried the iron poker from home, its weight a comfort against whatever spectral force spun the tune. Emma held a vial of salt water from the river's source, blessed by the vicar in a hurried rite. "If it's a spirit," Eliza had said back at the cottage, her wit sharp to mask the dread, "we'll drown its notes in brine." But as they stepped into the mill's shadowed belly, the air thickened, the music warping into a duet that mimicked their own voices, laughing, calling, pleading. The first chamber was a graveyard of machinery, gears frozen in rust, belts frayed like old veins. Eliza swung the lantern high, its light catching motes that danced to an invisible waltz. A shadow shifted in the corner, not quite human, elongating as if stretched by unseen strings. "There," Emma hissed, pointing. The form resolved into a silhouette, a man, or what had been one, his clothes tattered from decades past, fingers poised as if plucking air. Father's face flickered in its hollow eyes, then dissolved into mist. The music surged, a crescendo that pressed against their skulls, urging them forward. Eliza lunged, poker raised, but the shadow slipped like smoke, reforming behind them. The iron struck only damp wood, splintering with a crack that echoed unnaturally. "It's playing us," Eliza growled, spinning to shield Emma. Her bravery held, but sweat beaded on her brow. The air grew colder, the melody weaving doubts into their thoughts. Why fight? Join the harmony. Emma uncorked the vial, flinging the salt water in a wide arc. It hissed on contact, the shadow recoiling with a wail that shattered a nearby pane, but the music didn't falter. Instead, it splintered into discord, notes fracturing like glass, summoning echoes from the walls, more shadows stirring, a chorus of the lost. They backed toward the inner door, the one leading to the wheel pit, where the river churned black below. Emma's caution warred with panic. She grabbed Eliza's arm. "The plan's failing, we need to get out." But Eliza shook her head, eyes fierce. "No. We've come too far. It's here, the heart of it. We break it, or it breaks us." The shadows closed in, their forms multiplying, each one humming a fragment of the tune. One reached for Emma, its touch like ice through her sleeve, flooding her mind with visions, endless nights dancing in fog, no escape, no dawn. She stumbled, the journal slipping from her grasp, pages fluttering open to reveal ink that seemed to writhe. Eliza hauled her sister up, the poker swinging wild now, fending off the press. They burst through the inner door, the music roaring in triumph, a full orchestra swelling from the pit. Below, the wheel groaned to life unbidden, turning against the current, spokes blurring into a hypnotic whirl. At its center, suspended in the gloom, hovered the source, a crystal orb, no larger than a fist, pulsing with inner light, veins of shadow threading through it like roots. The music poured from it, pure and impossible, drawing the river's mist into tendrils that lashed out. Emma's breath came in gasps as they teetered on the edge. "The water, pour it in." But the tendrils whipped, knocking the empty vial from her hand. It shattered on the stones, useless. Eliza's face paled, her wit deserting her in the face of true peril. The orb's glow intensified, the music coiling around them, lifting their feet inches from the ground. Father's voice echoed clearest now, woven into the strain, "Come, girls. The song's for you." The hollow's curse, born of old greed, miners who bargained with something ancient for endless ore, binding their regrets into eternal melody. It fed on the living, twisting them into its players. With a cry, Eliza thrust the poker toward the orb, but a tendril wrapped her wrist, yanking her closer to the pit. Emma lunged, tackling her sister back, the two tumbling against the wall as the shadows swarmed. The music peaked, a symphony of sorrow, and in that moment, Emma heard it shift, not just pulling, but begging, a fracture in the harmony. "It's weak," she realized, voice steadying. The salt hurt it. "We used the river itself." Desperation sparked cleverness. She dragged Eliza toward the wheel's mechanism, fingers fumbling at the rusted lever. The shadows howled, closing in, but the twins moved as one. Alara's fingers trembled as she traced the final rune on the attic floor, the chalk dust clinging to her skin like frost in the dim lantern light. The music had grown faint now, a whisper threading through the rafters, no longer the wild symphony that had lured them here nights ago. Beside her, Mira knelt, her breath steady despite the pallor on her face, passing the small knife without a word. Their hands brushed, identical, calloused from years of shared secrets, and for a moment, the air between them hummed with something older than fear. The Bramble house groaned under the weight of the storm outside, rain lashing the warped windows like impatient fingers. Below, Father paced the parlor, his mutterings lost to the wind, while Mother's silhouette flickered in the hallway, a shadow clutching her rosary. But up here, in the cobweb-draped eaves where the twins had hidden their childhood treasures, the world narrowed to this circle, chalk lines etched in blood-pricked symbols, the remnants of the melody's source, a brittle violin string, salvaged from the woods where it shouldn't have been. "It ends tonight," Alara murmured, her voice a threadbare veil over the doubt gnawing at her chest. The music had started innocently enough, a melody only they could hear, drawing them deeper into the forest each dusk. Whispers of lost kin, it promised, tunes from the veil between. But the pull had twisted, shadows lengthening unnaturally, animals fleeing their path, and last night, the first real tear, a gash across Myra's arm that healed too slowly, as if the notes themselves were stitching flesh to something unseen. Myra nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. We bind it back. Together. No bravado, just the quiet resolve that had always anchored them. She sliced her palm again, a shallow cut mirroring Ilara's, and let the drops fall into the center of the rune. The floor absorbed them greedily, the chalk lines flaring briefly, a sickly blue that cast their faces in ethereal light. The music swelled in response, not angry but pleading, coiling around their ankles like smoke. Ilara felt it in her bones, a siren's call to abandon the ritual, to listen just once more. Memories flooded, the first notes under the oak, sweet as honeycomb, the nights they'd danced in the meadow, skirts twirling until dawn, the way it had mimicked mother's lullabies, father's fiddle tunes. But beneath it all, the dissonance, the wrongness of strings that vibrated without bow, harmonies defying every instrument in the county. She shook her head, forcing her hand to the string. By blood and silence, we sever you. The words, pieced from the old book they'd unearthed in the churchyard, tasted like ash. Myra echoed her, their voices overlapping in perfect twin harmony, a counterpoint to the ethereal song. The attic shuddered. Plaster sifted from the ceiling, dusting their hair like snow. The music clawed higher, notes fracturing into screams that echoed only in their minds, visions flashing, a figure in the trees, translucent, reaching with elongated fingers, the forest floor bubbling with unseen eyes. Ilara's vision blurred, the rune circle warping as if the wood beneath breathed. Myra gripped her wrist, nails digging in. Stay with me. It's fighting. Sweat beaded on Ilara's brow. The early plan had failed spectacularly, the salt circle in the woods, meant to trap the source, had instead amplified it, drawing the melody into their home like a tide. They'd burned sage, whispered prayers, even smashed the heirloom violin father swore was cursed. Nothing stuck until this, their own blood, their shared rhythm, to drown it out. Now, as the string in the center twitched, alive, writhing, the twins leaned in. Ilara snapped it between her fingers, the twang reverberating through the floorboards. Myra pressed her bleeding hand to the break, sealing it with a hiss of steam. The music peaked, a cacophony of shattered glass and weeping winds, then, silence. It came abrupt, like a door slamming in an empty house. The lantern steadied, the air growing heavy with the scent of damp earth and fading ozone. Ilara slumped back, her chest heaving, while Myra bandaged their hands with strips from her petticoat. Below, the storm eased to a patter, father's pacing ceased. But as they descended the creaking stairs, arms linked, Ilara caught a faint echo, not the music, but something residual. A hum in her veins, a shadow in the corner of her eye. Myra squeezed her arm, her expression a mirror of quiet unease. The entity was bound, pushed back to whatever hollow it crawled from, but the cost lingered, the forest would never sound the same, and in quiet moments, they both knew, a single note might yet call. Mother met them at the bottom, her eyes searching their faces. It's over, she whispered, rosary beads clicking softly. Ilara managed a nod, the weight of the night settling like fog. For now. They stepped into the kitchen, where dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in hesitant gold. Father stirred the fire, glancing up with unspoken questions. The twins exchanged a look, brave, cautious, bound tighter than before. The music was silenced, but its echo would whisper in their blood, a reminder that some songs, once heard, never fully fade.